funniest thing you've ever witnessed right in front of you. Story 1. I was walking through my neighborhood on a Sunday morning, loudly singing, me say day, oh, and a Jamaican guy popped his head out of the trunk of a car and sang daylight come and one go home. He had been packing the trunk or something, and I couldn't see him. It was wonderful. Story 2. Some big 300-pound dude was lambasting some girl for being too skinny and was saying you look like you need a freaking donut, you twig. A little 8-year-old nearby said you ate them all. It would have been kind of funny regardless, but the fact it was such a young kid made it hilarious. Story 3. A few years ago, I was playing Pictionary with my wife and her parents. When it was my turn, I had to draw the bearded lady. I'm terrible at drawing, so I came up with some stick figure with and a beard with a large triangle behind it. It was supposed to be a circus tent. Everyone starts guessing, but no one is close. Suddenly, my father-in-law jumps up and shouts vagina. Clitoris, clitoris. He was so caught up in getting the right answer that he just kept shouting it. At this point, we all lost it. I have never laughed so hard in my life. My mother-in-law still has the bearded lady posted on her fridge. Edit, I was able to get the bearded lady scanned. Note my arrow in an attempt to point out the beard. Also, I should point out that my FIL was across from me, so it was upside down to him. Story 4. So, I'm sitting outside a Boudin sourdough bakery in San Francisco near the Fisherman's Wharf and see the guy come out with one of their bread bowls full of soup. Now, if you've never been here, let me tell you the seagulls are everywhere and pretty aggressive about trying to get your food. So the guy goes and sits down and starts eating his clam chowder, and the birds are everywhere, squawking like seagulls do. And you can see it's irritating this guy. So he makes the mistake of tearing off a piece of bread and throwing it to the gulls. He thought it was bad before, but once they knew they could get food out of him, he was surrounded. So one of the seagulls lands near the guy and is standing with its back to him about 5 feet away. The guy gets up, walks over, and kicks the out of this. As soon as he turns around, he realizes this was a mistake. I would say there were 50 seagulls on this guy's food. He then screams, "Oh, I see how it is. You send your retarded friend to distract me while you sons of enjoy my food." It was quite funny. TLDR, seagulls are jerks. Story 5. I was traveling through the South a few years ago and eating at a restaurant on the side of the highway in the afternoon. As I turned around from the counter to walk to a table, a car came crashing through sitting area because it was rolling, flipping. It landed on its wheels, and 2 grossly overweight African-American women were sitting in the front seats. I stood there in shock, like everyone else, for a few seconds. As everything got quiet, you could hear the driver yell out, "Oh no, I just got my hair did." Needless to say, the 2 passengers were fine, and no one got hurt in the restaurant, but I laughed for hours because the 2 ladies were all upset about their hair. Luckily, the restaurant was mostly empty. Story 6 was at the movies with a buddy. He wanted to take us, so I entered the stall right next to his for a reason I can't remember, then came right back out. A few seconds later, this gigantic, 300 pounds black fellow comes in and sits in a stall I was previously in. My buddy, who thinks I'm still in the stall, wipes his then starts waving the covered toilet paper to the guy in the stall. I've never seen anyone yell so many curse words in public before. While all this was happening, I was on the bathroom floor, crying and laughing harder than I ever have before. Story 7, maybe not the funniest, but this annoying little girl was weaving recklessly through a crowd of people at the mall. I could see the scene from above as I rode the escalator up. She tripped and fell and spilled her bag of Skittles all over the place, and particularly in front of a shoe store. As she got up, an employee standing at the front of the store told her in a heavy Indian accent, "Taste the rainbow." Story 8, my university choir went to Finland one year, which was an amazing experience. The day we arrived, my brain was a bit foggy from the jet lag, but I wanted to take advantage of being there. So I went with my friends to explore Helsinki. I was walking down the street talking to one of my friends next to me when I walked straight into a pole. I wasn't hurt at all, just surprised, but as I collected myself, I noticed that the only person who had noticed aside from my friend was this random Finnish dude on the other side of the street who was intensely cracking up from what he'd seen. I think the sight of him laughing uproariously at my stupid moment is one of the funniest sights I've ever seen. Story 9, a very, very icy parking lot and a bunch of high schoolers rushing to their car. I saw at least 20 people slip and fall that day. I really enjoy watching people fall. Story 10, I watched a group of special needs adults ride go-karts. One of them would drive halfway around the track perfectly, then just slam his brakes for no reason. Another crashed into the wall, and when the go-kart employee put it back in the right path, she yelled, "One go, one go." The employee had no idea why it wouldn't, and then asked her if she was pressing the gas or the brake. All of a sudden, she took off and hit every wall till the end of that lap. The ending was the best part when the employee flagged them to come in a park. One girl drove straight at him, and he had to jump over a cart. She hit the wall behind him, ricocheted off, and kept going. Another female went into the parking area, but never slowed down and drove straight into the already parked car in front of her. She hit it so hard that she had a big booger hanging out of her nose afterwards. Then the girl who ignored the employee flagging people in earlier finally came around again, and the guy is waving the flag again at her, and she almost forgot, and at the last second turns into the parking area. However, she hits the median of the 2 lanes they had for the carts to park. Her cart is stuck in the concrete median with her front wheels still spinning. This is not me making fun of special needs people at all, but if you were watching this live, you would have laughed your off too. Story 11 in 8th grade, I had a friend named Roland who was about 4 tall, and another friend named Carl who was about 200 pounds and about 57. During lunch, in the cafeteria, Carl was getting his food, and Roland noticed his sweatpants sitting on the bench. Roland put on Carl's sweatpants over his own clothes and proceeded to walk around with them pulled up over his head. Carl saw it and ran to catch Roland. We had tears in our eyes from laughing as Carl chased his own sweatpants around the cafeteria. Story 12, I was sitting at some traffic lights a few weeks ago, and a guy on a fancy racing bicycle rode up onto the traffic island to wait to cross. Except he forgot he was wearing those shoes which clip into the pedals. So he stopped, balanced for a second, and then just toppled over. At that moment, the light changed to green, so I had to drive off. One of the funniest things I ever saw. Story 13, substitute high school chemistry teacher demonstrating reaction between calcium carbide and water. Test for the presence of acetylene with burning splint. Experiment instructions emphasized multiple times that only a single crystal of calcium carbide should be used. Poured the whole bottle into the petri dish, and then sent the class nerd to the office when he tried to interrupt the guy. When he actually tested for acetylene, his whole upper body was engulfed in a fireball that shot up, hit the ceiling, and left a black soot ring. The guy was okay, except every hair on his head had been singed off. My cousin yelling yeah, like Lil Jon and the guy in the car next to us responding with okay, eh? Story 14, I worked at Santa's Village, a downmarket amusement park. In the 80s, see Adventureland for an exact replica of the scene. Standing in my carnival game booth, I watched a kid stagger off the spinning teacup, ride a good distance away, and then veered dizzily this way, and that until he wound up directly in front of my booth, at the very center of my field of vision. He paused a second, puked up everything he ever ate in his entire life, and then staggered out of frame. It was like this perfectly choreographed little movie scene. I can still play in my head. Thank you, 80s kid. You were and still are hilarious. Story 15. This could be good. For my part, I was once in a classroom when in the middle of the lecture some kid in the front row got a phone call. He stood up, said loudly he'll be there right away, ripped off his hoodie revealing a cape and a Superman S. He then ripped away his Velcro pants and whooshed up the stairs and out the door. Everyone was dead silent. The professor, who was quite funny, then remarked, "Thank God he's catching up with the times." Story 16. A very large woman at a Scrabble tournament decided to loosen up before her first game. So as 100 people listened to the rules of the tournament, she got on the floor and started doing all kinds of stretching and aerobics. It wouldn't have been so bad if she wasn't 350 pounds and wearing summer dress. Story 17. My sister and 2 Cocker Spaniels were out back. Sliding glass door closed. The 2 dogs decide to run at full sprint inside. BAB and both dogs collide with the door. Then my unaware sister does the exact same thing. It all happened in about 6 seconds. Story 18. We had a Halloween party with a piñata. Because candy, anyway, one guy was dressed as LT Dangle, and one guy was dressed as the Hamburglar. Somebody knocked the piñata off the rope, and without missing a beat, the Hamburglar picked up the piñata and took off. Dangle drew his gun and immediately gave chase, yelling into his fake police radio all the way down the street. Story 19. I was riding a bike with my friends and asked this old nice lady in an electric wheelchair if she would race me. She did. Edit, my 2-wheeled transportation device was lawfully acquired by myself. Story 20. I was in the 3rd grade, and I had done the most important thing in my short life by then, by becoming friend with the popular girls. And I grew to be very close and would hang out all the time. One day, head popular girl summons us and says we're going behind the hills. The other damsels hop along toward the hills together, while I skeptically trudge along. Once there, all the girls lie down on the grass behind the hills, so they're not visible by the narcs that patrol recess and make you stand at the wall if you misbehave. Once they've all laid down, I can't help but ask, "What are you guys doing?" And head popular girl responds with, "We're having with our imaginary boyfriends." I laugh uncomfortably, and they actually proceed to have with air at 8 years old, just writhing on the floor and not even knowing what they're doing and making sounds quite funny. Very uncomfortable. Story 21. I was at a concert with a friend of mine, and she had to go to the bathroom. So I waited outside. Now, the bathroom in this place is located by an escalator. I looked over to this obviously very drunk woman underneath of the escalator. All I could think was wow, but then as she proceeds to stand up, she slips in her own and lands flats on her face in the I lost it, best concert ever. Story 22, my brother was riding one of those pocket rocket things, and as he passed, he gave me the finger, but then he rammed into a parked car, giving him a broken arm, and the car a huge dent. By the way, the car was my parents' car. Good times. Story 23, I was at a sci-fi convention with a friend, and we get on the hotel elevator. A 10-year-old or so girl gets undressed as 7 of 9, and these two fat guys dressed as Jedi behind us start mocking her for not having the goods to fill out that costume. Gross. My friend, who is also rather large, turns around, looks them up and down, and starts heckling them for being fat. Jedi, can't you use the Force to put those MMS down? The pizza's calling you to the dark side. Do you have to use the Force to get your fat into those robes? Those aren't even Jedi robes. Those are the hotel bathrobes. Everyone in the elevator was cracking up, and when the girl got off on the next floor, she had a great big grin on her face, turned around, and high-fived my friend on her way off the elevator. The fat Jedi got off on the next floor as fast as they could. It wasn't even the floor they were supposed to get off. Story 24 went sledding the other day, and some random dog took a major dump right at the bottom of the hill we were at. My friend screams up to warn everyone, then points it out to let everyone know. One kid comes zooming down the hill, realizes he's in the direct path of the pile, tries to stop before he hits it, bails right on top of it, and smears a little path of it as he's trying to stop tumbling. In a flash, he grabbed his sled, then noped the out. I didn't even see him leave. If he had just kept going, he would have went right over it and been totally fine. I named him Streaks. Story 25, my dad was at a stoplight in downtown Cleveland, and some guy with sagging pants starts using the crosswalk. His pants were sagging so bad that halfway across the street, they just fell off, and he fell flat on his face. Story 26, I was driving in Buffalo, New York, and it was a total whiteout. One thing they say is never to stop in a whiteout because a tractor trailer will just rear end you two. So I found a car and started riding his just because I could only see his brake lights when I was only inches from his bumper. Then the brake light started flickering like a strobe light, and the car came to a stop. I didn't know what to do, so I got out of the car. There was this huge black guy standing there, and he yelled, "Yo, man, I can't see." I laughed my off and took the lead for a while. Edit corrected spelling. Thanks autocorrect sarcastic, and thanks Tarkinus not. Story 27, once at college, there was an ice spot on the walkway outside our dorm, covered in a light dusting of snow. My friends and I all slipped on our way home. Later, from our common room window, we saw others falling. Within half an hour, 11 of us had gathered around the windows with tea and popcorn, watching every single person who walked down that path fall or flail crazily to keep from falling. One time, a really tall guy wound up doing a chicken dance for about 7 feet, but managed to stay upright. At the end, there was vigorous applause, but not from our room. We rushed outside, turned around, and saw that at least 4 other windows in our dorm had crowds gathered around them. We waved, and eventually all gathered on the lawn for an impromptu falling party. Story 28, my best friend and I are obsessed with ghost hunting, so we naturally went on the ghost tour that is offered in Old Town Albuquerque, New Mexico. We were the only 2 locals, but there were about 7 people from Canada. We get to this haunted window in a building that is now a restaurant. However, we failed to realize we're the only 2 people standing in front of the window, only about a foot away. As we listened to this ghost story, we were staring into this window, without realizing the restaurant was still open, and a lady basically runs past the window. We were so scared we were screaming at the top of our lungs. I couldn't move, and my best friend grabs me around the waist and tries to run off with me. I'm 59, and she's 52. It isn't until we finally get ourselves together that we look up and realize we scared one of the Canadian guys so badly he had taken off running and was now a block and a half away. The 3 of us looked really stupid, but it's still one of my favorite memories. Story 29, single mom at the beach with her, I would estimate 3-year-old son. The kid is having a very good day playing in the sand. All of a sudden, she gets a phone call and starts yelling at who I presume is the father, has a fit, and grabs the kid and starts telling him it's time to leave. She is pulling him along by the arm, and he getting dragged, and she's yelling on the phone. Finally, the kid lets go, and he turns around to yell at him it is time to leave and to hurry up. The kid standing there in his water wings, sun hat, and holding his yellow sand bucket yells at his mom, "I'm a kid. My legs aren't long enough. I can't move that fast. What do you expect?" Everyone around just started cracking up. Story 30, in high school chemistry. We used to play the plunger game during homeroom, where we'd toss a plunger in the air for various numbers of rotations and try to have it land stuck to the floor. One day, as the tosses were getting a bit extreme in the high ceiling lab, One guy tossed it a bit too high, and it landed on top of one of the light fixtures, which was amusing enough in itself. Later in the class, we were back in the lab. The teacher was a bald, red-faced, heavily mustached man and was in the middle of explaining our experiment when the plunger teeters off of the light fixture and plants itself directly atop his head. The combination of the perfect splunk and the sight of him staring up at the lightning rod on top of his head in stunned silence was too much to handle. Story 31, a couple summers ago. I was driving through the city with all the windows down with my cousin. For some reason, I had the most intense, loud sneeze of my life, and a car 4 lanes away going the opposite direction screamed, "Bless you," out of his car as he drove by. Story 32, walking home one night. Must have been 3 a.m. Come around the corner, and there's a skinny Chinese kid nailing a big native woman on the side of the road. She's moaning, and all he says is, "What's up," with the biggest grin on his face. We'll never forget it. The other night, my boyfriend and I were bored and stoned, so we decided to wreak some havoc. My friend had bought me a laser pointer for Christmas so I could play with my cat with it, and instead, we decided to point it at people outside our apartment complex. So, we live in Atlanta, right next door to a liquor store in a pretty shady part of town. My boyfriend decides to point it at this guy who was clearly cracked out. This man starts freaking out. He just stops in his tracks and holds his hands up in the air and screams, "Put the lasers on me. Come on, white devils. Put the lasers on me." Now, we were about 5 stories up, so he couldn't see us, but he just goes on this rant for about 10 minutes screaming about lasers and to bring it. I know it's pretty awful to mess with someone like that, but at the time I could not control myself from laughing hysterically. Only after the laughter subsided did we realize he was probably terrified and thought he was about to get sniped or something. Oops. Story 33, in high school, me and my mates were stood in a circle just talking, waiting for the teacher to turn up to let us inside. This was after dinner break or lunch, and hundreds of seagulls flocked to the playgrounds to scavenge food. One of those seagulls shat on my mate's face. My mate, being quite hard red, "A bit of jock for you, Merkin," shouted, "All right, who spat on me?" "You're dead." We were on the floor laughing, and then the realization on his face when he knew it wasn't spit, and in fact shite. He actually said, "It's not spit, is it?" with a grin on his face. I still crack up now thinking about it. Edit, I know what a merkin is. We use it as a slang term around these parts. If I found Reddit and main account, it's pretty certain I know what a toop is. I subscribe to WTF and ID Wager. There's a subreddit specifically for merkins. Story 34. I was at camp as a kid one summer, and a tedious counselor was telling a story. Everyone thought he was boring, but for once he had our attention. We stood in a circle in some woods, watching as his tale-telling became more animated due to our attention. At a climactic moment of his story, he pointed skyward and inclined his head, saying, and I looked up. At that moment, a flew over and shat on his forehead. I thought I would stop breathing for laughing so hard. Story 35. I was at a go-go bar, naked dancers on tables with my friends. My friend was quite drunk, and it was one of the rougher go-go's in Pattaya. So he put some money on the table and asked the dancer if he'd stick an ice cube up her, then she could try to get it out. Well, it did come out with some residual sprinkled on our table. There was a strange session of laughter and near vomiting too. But I've rarely laughed so much. X-Zone Walking Street, Pattaya, if anyone's interested in seeing some weird stuff. Story 36 was playing soccer. My buddy and his brother were on opposing team. I was advancing towards their net, and my buddy came at me from left, his brother on my right. When they both got close to kick the ball away from me, I stopped the ball. They both missed the ball and kicked each other in the shins. Bodies collided. Heads collided with a loud thunk. The way it all synchronized was so funny I couldn't continue running and just rolled on the floor laughing. I thought it was over, but then they both got mad at each other and started fist fighting. I was laughing so hard watching it all unfold in front of me. I thought I'm going to pass out. One of the funniest memories I have. Story 37. On a dry summer night a couple of years ago, a bunch of friends and I were drinking in a park. We were at the bottom of a hill with trees and were there for hours. Every time one of us went up the hill into the trees to pee, it made pee mud, so the next person to pee would pee a little higher up. We even had a roll of toilet paper on a branch. Well, after a couple hours, one of my girlfriends went up the hill to pee and slipped in the pee mud. She's a longboarder, so she has pretty good balance even when intoxicated, and we all hear what, and she comes majestically sliding down the hill out of the trees in a half squat with her pants around her knees without falling. I was laughing so hard I was crying at that one, and I'll never forget it. Story 38. I was sitting at the table with my mom and my 3-year-old niece, and out of nowhere my niece looks at my mom and says, "Everybody's looking at you because you're weird." Definitely one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Story 39 happened across a hot dog stand set up for some charity thing. My buddy and I get a hot dog because they were only $1. He says, "What's this for?" She says, "Schizophrenia awareness," he says. Well, Better give me two. Then he only said it because he wanted to help out, but she had a look on her face like you wouldn't believe. Story 41 time. I was stuck in traffic with my parents, so I decided I'd make small talk by saying, they say that white cars are most likely to be involved in a car accident than any other color car. Right as I said that, 3 white cars got into an accident in the lane next to ours. Note, it wasn't a serious accident. The last car bumped the car in front, which bumped the car in front of that. Story 41, I was getting dressed in our bedroom and was naked from the waist down, standing at the end of the bed. My wife must have seen something behind me poking out from under the bed and went down on 2 knees to fish it out. I really had not been paying close attention to how close she was, and bent over to pick up my underwear just as she straightened up with both of her hands full of whatever she had fished out from under the bed. As you might imagine, she was surprised to see my mere few inches from her face, and as a result, she accidentally lost her balance. And instead of dropping whatever she had and steadying herself on the bed, she held on to it for dear life and slowly tipped over, falling face first into the crack of my Harry. I was, as you might imagine, surprised as that there was suddenly a face in my. I stood up so quickly and clenched my butt cheeks so tight that I locked her nose firmly between my cheeks. And then time stood still. I was shocked and stood like a statue in stunned silence. She started screaming a muffled wail into my crack, and we both wondered what to do next. She started flailing wildly to find a purchase, and suddenly she realized she could drop whatever she was holding and push herself away. She grabbed my and shoved so hard she nearly pushed me halfway across the room. She sprung up and ran to the restroom so fast you could almost hear the Doppler effect, and started washing her face while both crying and laughing at the same time. To this day, all I have to do to get her to cringe in fear and embarrassment is mention the ass crack incident. Story 42 in high school. Our tennis team was on a long bus ride to a match. One random moment, we were all looking out the window into the window of the car next to us. It had a young boy in the passenger seat and an elderly woman, probably grandma, driving. The young boy went to turn the radio channel or something, and the woman came forth like a trained assassin and smacked his hand down hard. Not even taking her eyes off the road, we all laughed so hard. Story 43, while on a motorcycle trip across half the country, my father and I witnessed the tail end of a possible road rage incident. We were riding up the highway when one car passed a pickup and didn't think much of it. About 5 minutes later, we were on a bend, and there were both cars parked on a shoulder, drivers in mid-fisticuffs. As we passed, I looked over, and the fighters were so involved in their battle, they forgot to take the terrain into account, fell, and rolled down a slightly steep hill together. It wasn't until we stopped for a break about an hour later that my dad laughs and says, "Oh, and what was that fight about anyway?" I had forgotten about it until then, and all I saw in my mind was those 2 bozos tumbling down a hillside and kicking up a dust cloud. New Mexico, a girl peeing in the bushes, big street with bushes in the middle. When she noticed there was a street on the other side and saw me, she stood up, excused herself, but lost her balance. She tried to walk, but with her pants around her ankles, she stumbled for about 15 meters in slow motion, only to end back in the bushes where she peed. Story 44, I hope I can describe this to be as hilarious as it actually was. After a night at the bars, it was after 2, and I was waiting for my food order at Jack in the Box with all the other hungry drunk people. A girl next to me obviously can't wait for her food, so she takes out her iPhone, opens a packet of hot sauce, and squeezes it on her iPhone like a plate, and takes a huge lick. She had no idea what she was doing, and one of her friends had to pull the iPhone out of her hand mid-lick. I still laugh uncontrollably when I think of the visual. Story 45, back in high school. We were all traipsing across the grounds to the exit gate at 330. Someone had forgotten to collect all of the from P.E., and they were just lying around on the path. One girl was too busy talking to her friend and didn't realize they were on the path. She stood on one and did that typical dancing on a ball thing like a show dog or a slapstick clown. That was hilarious on its own, but then when she had managed to extricate herself from the ball, she stood on another one right in front of her. I thought that only happened in the Marx Brothers. It was a glorious day. Story 46, an ex-girlfriend and I were fighting using our words, calling each other names and whatnot, but none of it serious. She had said something along the lines of calling me stupid or idiotic, then turned around and walked right into the door frame. Literally fell to the ground laughing and cracking up. Story 47, I was with my extended family at a local amusement park when I was 10. My uncle and I went on a boat ride where you drive the boat around a small track. You could drive the boat freely, but it had no throttle control. It's a pretty boring ride unless you have someone like my uncle to ride with. Halfway through the ride, he suddenly turned the boat completely sideways and blocked the track. Since the boats had no throttle control, everyone bumped into us and got stuck as well. With a boat pile up holding up the ride, the attendants came to help my uncle, who started acting like he had special needs and couldn't understand what they were telling him to do. Every time they got him going straight again, he would keep turning until it got stuck again. The attendants tried to get me to tell him what to do, and I did, but my uncle would just do the opposite and kept turning sideways. Eventually, the attendant jumped on the boat and steered it the rest of the way while my uncle just smiled at him. Right after we got out of the boat, my uncle stopped the act and just said to the attendants, "Thanks for the ride." The combination of seeing my uncle act this way, the frustration of the ride attendants, and the embarrassment of my mom and aunt made it one of the best days I ever had at that place. My uncle died of cancer 6 years later, and I miss him terribly. Luckily, he was always doing stuff like that, so I have tons of great memories with him. Story 48, a group of us often went to my friend Ian's house at lunchtime in high school. Every day, we'd walk out of the school gates, go to the spar, get a pot noodle cup noodles, I think in the States, and a sliced loaf to share. Then we'd walk 5 minutes up the hill to his parents' house. Generally, we'd just use his kitchen, making toast, boiling the kettle for tea, and the pot noodles. Then we'd settle in front of the TV, eating, drinking, and watching whatever was on that day. This was our ritual almost every lunchtime for the latter part of our high school years. One day, though, it was different. Sometimes my friend would forego the pot noodle because he'd been left food by his mom from his previous night's meal. This day, it was a plate of spaghetti bolognese as he brought it out of the microwave. A delicious smell filled the kitchen. We all looked longingly at his hearty Italian lunch, and then back at our dreary pot noodles. Most of us were resigned to our gray meal. All except Mark. As we sat in the front room, Ian sat pride of place in his father's chair directly in front of the TV, with his large plate of bolognese on a coffee table. The rest of us were spread out on the large sofa. None of us had noticed Mark disappear until he re-entered the sitting room with a pneumatic air rifle over his shoulder. Sometimes would shoot targets and stuff down the garden after lunch while smoking cigarettes outside. So seeing the air rifle was nothing new. Casually, Mark walks over to Ian's bolognese, points the barrel just inside bolognese at the edge of the plate. Ian's face is suddenly pale. Say hello to my little friend. Mark pulls the trigger. In an instant, the bolognese went from the plate to covering literally everything on the side of the room Ian was sitting. Pieces of delicious spag bowl are everywhere, hanging off paintings all over the wall, dripping of the radiator, covering porcelain ornaments, the side of the TV, and also Ian, his white school shirt now stained red with Italian tomatoes. Ian was so shocked he didn't say anything. Mark, too, was shocked because had pumped up the pneumatic air rifle well beyond the recommended amount and was now looking at the result of a pellet-less blast of air meeting the bolognese and bolognese meeting the living room. Needless to say, the rest of us were in immediate hysterics. Tears of laughter at Mark fruitlessly trying to clean up the mess, Ian raging at Mark about his parents' living room. Obviously, we could never return to Ian's after this incident. Sometimes we'd forget, but then chuckle at the bolognese incident. TLDR boy turns into Tony Montana after being tortured by spaghetti bolognese. Story 49, a few years back I was working as a seasonal employee at a Target store. I was in the toy department one day and witnessed a young blonde girl, couldn't have been any older than 3, start to make beeping noises as an incredibly obese woman in front of her started to back up. It was everything I had to keep from busting up laughing. Story 50, I posted this somewhere else like yesterday. Gonna drop it off here as well. Oh man, frogs are kick-ass. I remember when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. Me and a friend made some traps out of plastic bottles. We caught around 20 frogs and 1 trout in a single day. Ended up digging an old aquarium out of the basement and putting them in that. Made a lot of land space with aquarium sand. Had a little watery bit and put the trout in there. Only problem was that my room didn't have enough space, so I had to put it in my 3-year-old sister's room. Turns out frogs can jump, who knew, and will do so if put in a shitty aquarium. I awoke to the sound of my little sister laughing like a maniac and my mother flipping. Ran in to see the room, including my little sister's crib covered in frogs. God, that was hilarious. Then my mother found a trout. More was flipped, and I had to set the frogs and the god trout free in our garden. I released a trout into the natural habitat of my god front lawn. He had it coming, though. That trout was a smug. Watching 20-something frogs and 1 trout jump around on the lawn was good fun. Me and that friend ended up having a lot of fun with frogs and trouts that summer.